Welcome to the 12.5 GitLab kickoff review. My name is Scott Williamson. I'm the VP of Product Management at GitLab, and I'm happy to be your MC for today. As in typical GitLab fashion, we are iterating on this meeting just like we iterate on our product. You might notice the artifact that we're going to review today has changed. Also in GitLab fashion, we like to use our own product. So we're going to use our own handbook to run the kickoff review from here on out. This page is auto-generated based on all the issues behind the scenes. And so if you're following along at home, about.gitlab.com/direction/kickoff is where you can find this page on your own. Note that there's a couple links in here. One of them is a link to a YouTube playlist of all the kickoff videos. And as you scroll down, you'll see in each section, we have links to videos. So if you're interested in an area and you want more context from the product managers responsible for these areas, you can check out these videos. Also, oops, okay. Sorry, let me share my screen. Also, there's a feedback link here. So at the end of this, we'd love to get feedback on how this format and how this meeting worked for you. We want to continue to iterate and make it as impactful as possible. So also a few other notes. Also note that we do plan ambitiously. We ask our team to be aggressive as they think about what we're going to plan. And as a result, we may not get all of this done. View this as our intention for the release, but not necessarily a commitment. Some of these things may slide, but we want to plan ambitiously. So with that, let's hand it over. We have a series of speakers that will cover the dev section is Eric Brinkman. The CI/CD section is Jason Lenny. The ops section will be Kenny Johnston. Secure is Nicole Schwartz. And Secure and Defend, and then enablement, Josh Lambert. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and Eric will take over to run you through some of the highlights for the dev section. Eric, over to you.
Thanks so much, Scott. My name is Eric Brinkman. I am the Director of Product for the dev section. The dev section is the first 3 stages of the DevOps lifecycle. That's manage, plan, and create. And we have a ton of stuff to run through in the next 20 minutes, so I will attempt to be pretty quick. I'll start with the manage stage. In the manage stage, we have 2 big themes that we're going to be focused on. The first theme is focusing on enterprise-grade improvements, and the second theme is analytics. So to assist our customers with enterprise readiness, we're going to extend the soft deletion functionality that we are already working on for projects to groups. And this will allow users to recover from accidental deletion of groups by placing groups in a read-only state before actually deleting them. We'll also be focusing on the creation of a new construct inside of GitLab called policies. Policies are a framework that let users define effects, actions, resources, and conditions, and will be a powerful tool to help implement things like least privilege access inside of GitLab. And so you can see some of the mockups here in the issue. For analytics, we'll be continuing to focus on the type of work improvements or productivity analytics. This will include a breakdown for engineering managers to understand if the work their teams are doing is new code, churn, refactoring. And then we'll also be focused on providing customizable stages inside of cycle analytics. Cycle analytics is a great feature if you're using 100% of the GitLab workflow, but a lot of our users have given us feedback saying they want to be able to measure time between different events that make sense for their organization's workflows. And so we're going to allow that to happen in cycle analytics, making that feature more valuable to those users. In the plan stage, we're focused on 2 large themes as well: improving sprint management inside of GitLab and improving our epics experience. In order to improve our sprint management, we'll be releasing a feature to allow multiple milestones to be attached to an issue or merge request. So this will let our users take advantage of saying an issue is going to be worked on in a given sprint, but then also released in a given release, and a lot of organizations detangle those two constructs. So pretty excited about that. And we'll also be providing a more historically accurate burn down chart. So if you add a bunch of issues into like a release after that release has started, you essentially have added a bunch of scope to the milestone that should be recorded. And conversely, if you take issues that should have been delivered in a milestone and move them out, you would want to understand that in the burn chart. But if you do in the burn down chart, but if you do that today, essentially you lose all of that historical context, and it's difficult to tell how much scope was either added or how much work was missed in a given milestone. So burn down chart should begin to tell a better story of history for a team's performance. For epics, I'm really excited that we're going to start making epics a little bit easier to find inside of GitLab and just easier to work with in general. What you're looking at currently is the issue to make epics more accessible and easier to find. And the ironic thing about this issue is that you don't see epics really anywhere on the side navigation. And so this is because epics are really scoped at a group level and not a project level, and you're looking at a project. But we're going to add epics into that left-hand navigation bar so that you can easily get to the list of your epics. So pretty pumped for that work, and I think that'll be a huge win for our customers. If you've ever linked issues or epics together, you've probably been frustrated by that experience because it requires you to go and copy and paste a link. But in this issue, we're actually going to let you search for an epic or an issue when you're linking issues together. And so quite excited for that improvement as well. On the kickoff page, there's a bunch more improvements to epics, so please take a look. But in the essence of time, I just wanted to highlight these two. And then lastly, in the plan stage, I also wanted to highlight the fact that we're going to be starting to invest into requirements management, and the start of that is going to be introducing dependencies between issues. So we're going to add a blocks and is blocked by construct inside of GitLab issues, which should help identify dependencies between issues to understand what's blocking or what's blocked by. So quite excited for that as well. The third stage that I'm responsible for is the create stage, and we have a bunch of really great things coming there as well. If there's one big theme for the whole stage, it's that the merge request performance and experience is really going to be enhanced in this release. So we've got some remaining performance problems in rendering diffs on the changes tab that when we break apart the request for rendering that diff is really going to help the performance of a merge request. We're also going to split apart loading syntax highlighting to load those incrementally, and then cache highlighted MR diffs file by file. So really excited to see some of those performance changes, but also excited to see some of the kind of user experience changes coming to the merge request as well. What you can see on my screen is we're making a change that will automatically update the merge widget when new commits are pushed. Currently, if you do that, you have to reload the merge request in order to merge the merge request. And a common workflow is to apply a suggestion yourself very quickly in the merge request discussion. And then it should be very, very easy to merge that without requiring a reload. And so we'll be adding this functionality. I'm quite excited for that. And then the other thing I'm pretty pumped to see is that we're going to make some improvements to the merge request UI by putting the subnav just below the title. If you've ever experienced a merge request with a really long description, it can be really difficult to find the subnav. And in this case, I've scrolled about a third of the way down the page just to get to that subnav. It can be hard to find. You can scroll past it pretty easily. We're going to put this right below the title. And then we're also going to collapse the merge request description into the discussion so that when you view a diff, the description goes away. You can just focus in on the diff. So some really great improvements coming to merge request experiences as well. A few other things to highlight and create very quickly. We are continuing our work on some of our research spikes into our high availability for Italy. Super important for enterprise architectures with failing nodes for Italy, and we want to make sure that experience is robust. We are going to put some effort into the continued testing of Prefect, which is the optional reverse proxy service for Gitaly, which will eventually let multiple Gitaly nodes run behind the reverse proxy. We're doing some experimental testing right now on this in 12.5, and this will lead us on the next path of iteration to making Gitaly HA more generally available. And then lastly, from the other groups out of Create, we have some improvements coming into design management. Previously, we've launched the ability to comment on designs, but those comments are buried in the Designs tab when you navigate inside of an issue. Those comments should be pulled out into the main discussion portion of the issue so that those comments are seen right next to other comments on the issue. So we'll be doing that. We'll also be generating smaller versions of design images when they're uploaded. This will give us the ability to put thumbnails in various places throughout the application. And then we'll also be adding some improvements into Elasticsearch. And so what we're going to be doing here is adding the mapping version to the index in the admin UI. And this will allow you to specify a mapping to each index when you create an index. And then once you get that index filled with data, and then you can switch over to what index is being used as primary, which should help with zero downtime deployments when the index needs to be changed, modified, or reduced in size. So that was a quick run through of what the dev section is going to be focused on, and I think 12.5 is going to be a great release for us. Back over to you, Scott.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Let's shift to Jason for CI/CD.
Sure, thanks. Let me get my screen shared. All right, so hopefully everybody is able to see this now, what we've got planned for CI/CD. We've got a lot of exciting stuff planned here, including some very popular items that have been out for a while that we've got scheduled and are looking forward to delivering. Probably the most exciting one there is the first one on this list, which is getting Windows shared runners out in beta form. That's something that we've been working on for a while with the runner team. We've put a lot of work into that. We had worked on the Windows executor before that, and all of that is sort of built up to us getting to having Windows shared runners. So we're hoping with the 12.5 release to start our beta. Some of the details of how that's exactly going to work is not exactly published yet and not fully decided, but we'll be working on that. If you're interested in following along, please join that epic and join the conversation. We're also working on improving an artifact-based view for the JUnit XML. And what this does is lets us show more about what the tests are doing when they're running. So you can see tests that are failing and get more info on that. You can get more info on the tests that are passing as well, including metadata on those. And this will just make it a much nicer experience for when using the JUnit XML results that are built into GitLab. We've also got here the visual review app. We're improving the styling on that and usability in a lot of different ways. In particular, we are making it easier to provide multiple pieces of feedback and provide feedback on multiple MRs. So if you haven't used this feature yet, now's a good time to try it and check out some of the new features that we're adding to make it easier to use, easier to configure as well. Next up. Next up is triggering pipeline when another project is rebuilt. And that's a feature that will allow you to configure relationships between projects so that you can have a project that's dependent on another subscribe to whenever the master branch is built in that other project. And so you can, if you're dependent on that project releasing new artifacts or new dependencies or whatever, you can pull those in automatically and not have to necessarily coordinate with that other project and have them add a trigger or something like that. Keeping the latest artifact for each job is another feature that we're really excited to be delivering. What this will do is make it possible so that the latest artifact for a given job is always kept around. And what this will let you do then is set a very, very aggressive expiration policy on your artifacts. So you can manage the disk space that your artifacts are using in an easier way where You can readily get rid of any artifacts that you don't really need and not keep them around forever, while at the same time knowing that you've always got the last one that was built. It was difficult to balance that previously, and this will make that a lot easier. Next up is these two. They're really related to each other, protecting the GitLab CI YAML from changing by developers and supporting the GitLab CI YAML outside of the repository. What we're doing there is making it possible to configure your project so that the GitLab CI YAML is outside of the repo. The reason for this is originally so that open source projects that are building packages or building distributions that contain packages that they don't have write access to the repo or don't want to introduce a GitLab CI YAML into, they can store these somewhere, build the project easily. But what this also lets us do is use that external repo or the external GitLab CI YAML to place the GitLab CI YAML in a different project that has different permissions and then can be managed in a different way. So that's a nice improvement there. We're sort of getting a 2-for-1 on that, and it's always nice when we can do that. We had a lot of great conversations with customers in these two that really helped us come to a creative solution, and it's always nice when we get a chance to do that. On the package side, we're continuing some of the big items that we've been working on for the last release as well. So finishing up the Conan C and C++ package manager is on the agenda. In terms of new things, we're adding metadata to the package registry UI. We actually did a ton of customer research and came up with an incredible list of different kinds of metadata that can be shown, and we're starting to work on that. But we're starting with just the last commit and branch name as a way to do this in an iterative way and bring some immediate value. And then we'll look to continue going back and adding more and more of this additional metadata that will make the package UI easier to work with. And then the other item that I wanted to mention was improving the performance of the delete API. For teams that are managing very, very large instances of GitLab, the delete API for the container registry has been a sore spot where it takes a really long time. It's not highly performant. It's hard even to iterate over the items. So we're diving into that and making that easier to use in order to manage the disk space that your containers are taking. Then finally, on the release side, we're continuing our focus on making the releases feature better and more complete. We're capturing now audit actions associated with releases into the audit log, which is helpful for teams that are doing enterprise release governance. We are also making it possible to filter issues and merge requests by release. So we've introduced a feature where you can associate milestones, one or more milestones with the release, and it will be possible now to see, to filter from an issue list on the releases as well, which will tie this together in a very, very nice way. We're making it possible also to generate the release from the GitLab CI YAML. At the moment, with the feature in a new state, we're only really able to do that with the a curl command. Yeah, it will be much more nicer to be able to do that in the GitLab CI YAML directly. And then we're also adding it in the UI, which was an item that we pulled in from the last release as well. Cleaning up stale environments is something that, again, for larger instances is really interesting. If you have too many branches, if you have too many users who are interacting with your projects, you can end up with a lot of environments that are running unnecessarily. And there isn't really an easy way to manage those and clean them up. So we're looking at some new controls that'll make that easier. You can clean up stale environments in an easy way and apply some rules and have that be nice to use. And finally, the very last item that I want to talk about is limiting pipeline concurrency using semaphores, which is to say that you can have a named configuration. Typically, you might name this the same thing as an environment. And then that will prevent more than one deployment happening to any job that is using that same lock. So if you have a physical environment, if you want to control deployments to a production environment in an orderly way and not using merge chains, you can do this using semaphores. This can even work for kind of unusual testing environments, like where there's a physical environment that's not just a test environment that you might deploy to, but is like a shared piece of hardware that's under test, like in manufacturing, things like that. So a bunch of cool stuff here for the CI/CD section. Feel free to dive in and check out the rest of the things that we've got here as well. There's a ton of great content. There's also videos that dive into CI testing and runner that you can check out. And all of that stuff is hopefully super exciting for you as well. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on that stuff. Thanks. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Jason. Let's pass control to Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Let me share my screen real quick. Here we go. Yeah, so my name is Kenny Johnston. I cover the ops section that includes both our configure and monitor stages. I'll hit a couple of the highlights here. We're doing a couple of thematic things around improving the enterprise robustness of our serverless set of features. So we rely on Knative, and we're adding SSL support and the ability to kind of define a single public domain for you to use for SSL support, or for your serverless functions. We're continuing to iterate on our auto DevOps functionality, making it more efficient and faster by using a different method for creating your Docker containers, a different build pack, as well as having it not run in places where it shouldn't. It's has been a pain point for customers that we've heard. But there are a couple of ones that I want to highlight outside of those themes. The first is we're continuing to put our effort into an item that we've spoken about in previous kickoffs around adding AWS EKS support to GitLab so that you can natively provide your AWS credentials and create EKS clusters within the GitLab UI that can then be attached and used to add managed applications. The next one is a really cool MVC for our first step in chaos engineering. Where we're gonna add a managed application called KubeMonkey that helps ensure that your application is resilient to infrastructure failures, like a pod failure in a Kubernetes cluster or a node failure. And then lastly, we are doing something pretty unique. We'd had customers frequently ask us for the ability to adjust the configuration of the managed apps that we install on their Kubernetes clusters, things like Prometheus or Knative, for example. And so we are actually taking this unique approach that leverages our deep integration with source control, where you can define that configuration for the managed app that is installed on your cluster in source control right next to your app in the same repository. So that's super cool. I'd encourage you to check out the videos from the configure team. Daniel and Victor, the two PMs there, did a great job summarizing their issues in more detail. On the monitor side, we have a couple of big themes, and then as well one or two items that I would love to highlight. The first is we're really investing in getting our error tracking to viable. So today you can attach the credentials to a Sentry instance and surface some basic information about those errors in GitLab itself. For those who use error tracking, this is super useful for both the developer workflow who needs to triage and adjust their application while on a development branch, but also the production team who wants to see the errors coming in from production users. So in this release, we're going to be adding both search for errors, as well as some ability to dive into the details of the error right in the GitLab UI. Super cool to start seeing more of this integrated directly into your GitLab experience. We're also going to be doing a next iteration on our logging features, where we'll allow you to install Elasticsearch to your Kubernetes cluster, which will, today, if you've used our logs feature, you're limited to a single pod's logs that you can view, and this will allow you to get an aggregated view across all the various logs that are installed in your cluster. Lastly, we're doing a couple of iterations around bringing the observability system that you've defined for your production application into source control, again, right alongside your application, so that you can do things like define the dashboards more easily and the structure of those dashboards, as well as the alerts that you want for your application monitoring, and those get deployed automatically along with your application. So those are a couple of the highlights for the ops stage that I'm really excited about in 12.5. I'll hand it back over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Kenny. Let's move to Nicole for Secure and Defend.
Hey, so I wanted to highlight a couple things if you want to get into the details. We've got 3 videos that you can go for more in-depth looks. The first thing is that there's going to be secret detection available to run on the full history of your repository, so you can find any secrets that have been previously exposed. This is really great because it's a common mistake that has a high risk. Also, if you have a React project and you've wanted to use our static application security test, or SAST, that's going to be coming, and you'll be able to do that starting with the next release. And Also, have you ever wanted to know what security features you actually have turned on or which ones are available? We're going to make that a lot easier. Instead of having to go to your config file, there's now actually going to be a configuration page within the UI that you can look at and see exactly what things are enabled and not yet enabled, so you know what your options are. And the last thing kind of I want to highlight for Secure is that we've been on kind of a streak of getting all of our security scanners to work offline. So if you've got an air-gapped instance, you can still run security scans, and container scanning as of the end of this next release should hopefully be available to you if you're running in an air-gapped situation. And I'll also be covering Defend. And right now we've got 2 things in Defend, and I kind of wanted to tell you a little bit about the WAF statics reporting. That's going to benefit you if you want to really quickly check to see if traffic is flowing through and things are functioning, as well as what is the block allow ratio. So it'll give you some quick statistics on that, which should make troubleshooting and information a little bit easier for you to come by. And the last one is a really big effort we've been working on for a while. It's where you're going to be able to escalate a finding that you have into a vulnerability, and that vulnerability will be really easy for you to track and share. It's going to be something similar to an issue, but with different attributes. But now you can much more easily check on the history of something, share it with other people, attach it to things. And so that's going to hopefully make everyone have a lot easier time with tracking these instead of having to look in reports. So again, check out the videos if you want to find out more. And let me stop sharing so I can hand it over to Joshua.
Thanks, Nicole. So I'll be covering our enablement section, which covers 5 groups: distribution, geo, memory, database, and ecosystem. And we have 3 main themes we're going to accomplish this release. The first is improving the performance of GitLab. To that end, we'll be working to enable Puma on GitLab.com. Puma is a multi-threaded application server versus Unicorn, which is per process. By shifting to multi-threads, we can see a memory reduction of about 33% of our instances. This can, of course, give you more headroom as well as more performance, and so we're very excited about this. We're also working to drive down hotspots in our code. The 2 main ones we're working on this release are the projects and the merge request endpoints. And then we're also doing the groundwork to enable the utilization of Postgres specific features. We're doing this by switching from schema.rb to structure.sql. And this will lay the groundwork again to do things like partitioning and sharding, which are features that are Postgres specific and previously weren't available with the previous architecture. We're also working to improve the UX of operating GitLab. We're doing this by enabling the container registry by default, and that will lower the requirements as well. And so you no longer need to have a separate DNS domain name to run the container registry. We're also adding geo support in our Helm charts, and we're continuing to work on our Red Hat-based container images for those who prefer them. Finally, we're working on enabling geo on GitLab.com. To this end, we'll be tracking the rollout to staging first, and then we'll be defining the architecture for production. This way, we'll be well positioned to continue to enable GitLab.com in production in the near future here, the next subsequent releases. So those are the key things we're working on in enablement this release. And back to you, Scott, to wrap it up.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate all the speakers who have explained all the great stuff we're doing. I also want to thank all the contributors behind them internally and externally for making all this stuff come true over the next month. And I also want to thank every one of you who joined in to follow along. We appreciate your, we appreciate you. And let me close by saying there's a feedback link towards the top of the doc. If you could take a few seconds to fill that out and let us know how we're doing, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, and have a great Friday. Bye.